episode 1146. My Strength is My Story with Cori Salchert. I will love you forever.
Moms, needing a little inspiration and a ray of hope? You've come to the right place. This is the show that you can turn to for just the pick-me-up you need. This is Create Your Now, Your Best Selfie. Here's your host, certified life coach, personal trainer, and nutritionist, Christiane Wargo.
Staring at a stop sign, watching people drive by.
Happy day. Today is my favorite day of the week. It is My Strength is My Story series, and we have with us an extraordinary woman. She is truly heavenly sent, an angel here on earth. Her name is Cori Salchert. She is going to touch your heart as you hear her story. You may have recognized her name because she's been on the Today Show, People Magazine. Her story is incredible when it comes to caring and loving on hospice babies. You'll want to stay tuned to hear from her directly. For those of you who are brand new to Create Your Now, friends and family of Cori's, welcome to our family. I'm so delighted of your presence. If you already haven't had the opportunity, you'll want to head on over to createyournow.com where you can learn more and sign up for the Kisses newsletter, the Keep It Simple Strategy, everyday solutions to live, love, and impact. Well, I have to tell you that this episode, when I was chatting with Cori, we really got to the core. It was beyond heart to heart. There were tears that were shed. There was joy that was shared. All because of these precious little babies, precious children that somehow, some way, we think that they aren't to be loved because they are not of the norm, how we see it here on earth. But they were created in God's image, and they need and deserve the right to be loved and to live before they were received into heaven. I'm telling you, your heart will be touched, it will be broken, and then it will be mended. You will find a joy like none other. This was a really difficult one for me to swallow because it was so precious. And she shares her heart. She is so vulnerable. She has been through so much. You would think that the enemy just keeps attacking, but this is her house of hope. Without further ado, let's welcome in Cori Salchert. I will love you forever.
Hello and welcome to Create Your Now. Today is My Strength is My Story series, and we have with us an extraordinary woman. She truly is an angel. Her name is Cori Salchert. She is a wife of 30 years to Mark and mother to their 8 biological children. She is a registered nurse and a former perinatal bereavement specialist. Cori understands the challenges that hospice babies face with medically life-limiting or terminal diagnoses. And now, Cori is the author of her brand new memoir, I Will Love You Forever, a true story about finding life, hope, and healing while caring for hospice babies. She truly has a house of hope. Welcome, Cori, my friend and sister in Christ. How are you?
Thank you. Good morning.
Oh, it's so good to have you here, and I know today is a little bit crazy for you, and so I know God right now is placing a hedge of protection over your family and over your children and all that you do.
Well, undoubtedly, or we wouldn't be doing this.
Oh, I can only imagine what you go through on a daily basis. Take us through what a day looks like for you.
Well, I had a meme this morning that I had posted that it says, I am a parent of a child with special needs. I spend most of my time in fight or flight mode, protecting you, advocating, combing the universe for some new treatment or therapy that would help. Then, just when I least expect it, you melt all that stress away and do something extraordinary that transforms my mood. You do something that only I could understand its meaning and impact and give my heart wings to soar on forever with all things hope and love. So, day in and day out, it is something that we have terminally ill, nonverbal children who aren't going to perk up and say thanks so much. One of the ways I think that all that preparatory work God had to do in my life was to get over a results-oriented process that, you needed to have an atta-girl all the way through in order to know that, you're on track and you're doing what you're supposed to be etc., because the children that we have are just not able to communicate with their eyes, really. They can't communicate with their mouths, and they're not going to get up someday because of the care that we've given and, go on to lead normal, productive lives. They're going to die, and the process of getting to that point, like I had said earlier, this morning has been really hairy with our 14-year-old, and so we're kind of sitting on the fence. Are we going, or is this just a glitch?
Something that the average person doesn't experience on a daily basis, and you deal with this. And reading your book, and I've got to tell you, the way you wrote your book is incredibly beautiful, and it put me in your moment, in your day, as you scripted it and wrote it, and I read each word. And I got to tell you, just a rush of emotions. But what I got from that is that you did not just end up by accident wanting to care for hospice children. When you look back at your life and you see the connection and God's fingerprints throughout, it is absolutely incredible. Take us back a little bit to your life and growing up and things that you went through, especially with your sister, Amy.
So early on, you definitely had experience with a child that had very severe medical needs, and the challenges that presented for our family to just maintain a family life for my mom and dad, to be juggling quote-unquote normal kids, as well as my sister who was seizing all the time. And, God has brought me to a place because it was necessary in order to have empathy for my mother, and not just sympathy, but empathy with the day-to-day, oh my goodness, how is it going to hit the fan today? And, are we going to be able to stay home, or are we going to be heading to the hospital? Will I be able to get anything done today that I had planned, or will all of that be chucked? And I know what it is to not wait successfully. I know what it is to wait and be chafing at that and hating every minute and praying for deliverance and it not coming. And so in this process of 52 and a half years, God has just brought something about where sometimes he steps in and delivers, and sometimes he sustains. And so my prayer is, that he would help sustain me, whether he's going to deliver me today or whether he's going to just continue to sustain. And either way, it's miraculous. And so Amy was my first introduction into the world of special needs. But what a gift she was, in the fact that, other people were very repelled by her spasticity, very repelled by her seizuring. The invitations to be able to go anywhere just dwindled. People didn't want to have to deal with that. They definitely didn't want their children exposed to that. And that, is, I don't know if anyone lately has seen Wonder, but that mom, you're going to go to school, and dear God, please make them be nice to him. And knowing that people can see your child, and a small child may start crying and be repelled by it, or that it's a teachable moment for parents to step up and say, you know what, we're not all the same, and just because he's different doesn't mean he's bad. So, ask some questions. Are you wondering why that tube is coming out of his throat? And, why is he hooked up to that machine? And how does he eat? And, why doesn't he look at me? And, giving an opportunity, and I don't know is an answer that I can give to kids. And Amy's disabilities that she had were something that were just so familiar to me that when I was brought in contact with children that we were going to bring home here, there was almost a sense of comfortability with the situation, simply because I'd been here before. It was part of my sister's package, and so it wasn't terrifying because I wasn't totally unfamiliar with what was going on.
Wow. And imagine that God took all of that. Amy, in reading your story, Amy did not live with you all for forever.
No.
She ended up, you guys moved off. Your dad, if I can remember correctly, went to seminary, went to become a pastor, changing jobs, and she went to live in a home.
Yes. She was moved when she was 5 years old to the American Fork Institute for the Profoundly Mentally Retarded. Now, how's that for a cumbersome name? It's no longer named like that. The word retarded, which just means delayed, has become such a slanderous word that, that was that was taken off of the name of the home. And at one point in time, I think the American Fork Institute had about 2,500 kids, and they have since, I believe in the 1990s, moved most of those that were under the age of 18 back home and have supported them there rather than having them live in this institute. And the thing is like when my mom had Amy at home, there's no one, speech or occupational therapy, physical therapy, all of those kind of things were at the hospital, primary children's, and about an hour away from our home. And it was something that my mom had to haul all of us because there wasn't babysitting available, and my sister didn't walk. She just got heavier and heavier, and she had to go and do this. And then she had the constant onslaught of people saying, you can't do this. You can't do this. You can't do this. And you know what? Honestly, when my situation is so different than my mom's. Now, we may have the same child, but I am so supported here at home by physicians, by nurses, by therapists, by social workers, that it's like, okay, how can we make this work for you? Because it took Rosemary Kennedy, being in institutions that were absolutely horrific, and the reform that came in to where, my sister was in one that, for all practical purposes was really a great place for her to live, to coming to the notion of let's support these families while they keep their children at home rather than having them, living apart. And the deal was like when, they finally convinced my folks that this was going to be the better option for Amy to go and live at that home, and so she did when she was 5. And my dad becoming disabled because of his autoimmune diseases, and then needing to find an alternative kind of employment, so he went to school in Colorado, and we moved. But that was also because the medical community at that point in time felt it was best for Amy not to have interaction with our family, because that made it harder for her to be at the institute, and they felt it was confusing for her not to know why it is that we weren't there. And so, especially right after she was brought, they advised my mom, who was her primary caregiver, not to come back for a long time in order to have Amy adapt, which is just, now they've certainly proven that that's not such a great thing. But
how did that, Cori, affect you as her sister growing up?
Well, my take on it, and again, it's just what I know now and what I knew then are two very different things. But as a child, as a 9-year-old, I didn't get it. And I knew that Amy cried a lot, and that she was sick, and that, she had seizures, and that she had lots of health problems. And then, so for me, and this is, again, my take on it and magical thinking, you know what, it really didn't have anything to do with me. But as a child, you make everything about you. And I thought surely that I had failed somehow to be able to help enough with Amy that we could keep her home. And that was not true. But that was what I thought. And I also felt as though, you know what, you better not cry and you better not be sick, because you could disappear. And so that carried a weight with me for a long time until God just finally shook the snot out of it and said, you know what, you're so afraid of being abandoned. I am going to let some of those people in your life that you know abandon you, so that you will understand you're okay, and you will survive what you think is the worst-case scenario. And, in fact, you're going to come out on the other side and go, you know what, the thing that had such a stronghold of fear in your life for years took a hit, and it doesn't have to have that kind of sway anymore.
God really shook you to the core.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Oh, in more ways than one, and that's why you all are going to want to pick up your own copy of I Will Love You Forever, a true story about finding life, hope, and healing while caring for hospice babies. Well, with Amy, you had this magical thinking that you had failed somehow. This is where you were as a child thinking, and then the unfortunate happened with your sister.
Yes. And one thing, I watched a movie the other day called A Boy Called Poe. And I don't even know when that was set, but given the hairstyles and things like that, it was probably filmed quite a while ago, but it's available now on Netflix. And I was watching that, and this boy, his mom dies, and his dad is finally convinced that an institute is going to be better for his son, who is severely autistic. And so he puts him in there. Well, his son is like an idiot savant. I mean, so he definitely is incredibly gifted in some ways, and then not in others. And he escapes. He calls a cab, and he escapes, and he goes down to the pier where he used to spend time with his mom. But the people at the home call the dad and say he's gone and we don't know where he is. And so in my heart, and you know the story, I'm like, oh, yes. Oh my goodness. And you know what? It's not just Amy that was able to get out of the security of that home. And there are human, fallible people who care for these kids. And, they're not superhuman, and quote unquote mistakes can be made. And Amy was able to get out of the building, and then she was able to get off the fenced property of the home and then onto a golf course next door. And for a Friday afternoon that was absolutely beautiful and had golfers on that golf course, no one saw her. And she found a lake on that golf course and waded in and drowned.
And little did you know what was really going on, because they tried to reach you all, but you all had recently moved.
Well, we had actually been back from Colorado for a year, but for whatever reason, and we just look at that as providential, for whatever reason, the social worker that we had not updated that on her chart. And so they were continually trying to call our home in Colorado, and we had not been there during the time that they were searching for her, because, and you know what, the crazy, ironic, providential twist to this is that the very social worker that was in charge of our family and Amy was the golfer that was golfing that next day and came across Amy's body in the lake and recognized her because of her hair. Amy had really beautiful brown curly hair, and that, in notifying that, then was told that, he hadn't actually even been called that Amy was missing, and he was the one who called my mom to tell her. But we did not have to spend hours and hours and hours trying to find her. She was found, and then we got the call.
I can just hear in your voice and in your heart the love that you have for your sister, who was blessed to be on this earth. She was created in the image of God. And even though you were a child and now as an adult, you can see things differently. How did you begin to mend fences with God and Him? Because you went through a lot of turmoil. I mean, when you read your book, I'm like, how much more is left? I mean, seriously, it ripped my heart at times. I'm like, Lord, come on, when is enough? This woman has been through so much. Why is she just, it seems like you're getting just hit down every single time you turn a corner. And I know, granted, it's somewhat of a snapshot,
right.
Maybe it wasn't every day like that. But how did you begin to mend fences with God, knowing that, okay, why I'm carrying this guilt, Lord? Maybe if I was there, Amy wouldn't have gone there. Maybe if she was living at home. Maybe if, I hadn't failed, or whatever you were, was going through your mind. How did you begin to heal that part of your relationship with God?
Well, it was a process that was years long, because I sort of made a choice for a very long time to harbor that hurt and that wound, and I didn't necessarily desire healing because I had my terms, and we'd go back and undo what was done. There wasn't really an acceptance of how things had happened, and it wasn't until probably 10 years ago, something like that I first heard the song by Selah, Unredeemed, and it may be unfulfilled, it may be unrestored, but anything that's shattered, that's laid before the Lord, just watch and see. It will not be unredeemed. And I firmly believed at that point in time that God just said, you know what, are you tired? Are you tired enough of being wounded? Do you really want to be healed, or do you want to hang on to this hurt and this perception that I somehow failed? And in my book, and I say that, and I kind of apologize for it, I just vomited the messes at his feet and said, fine, you know what, take it. I want to be healed. I don't want to live wounded anymore. I don't want to live guarded, as though somehow I could say that you have been unfaithful because X, Y, and Z has happened in my life. And because he is good and because he is faithful, really a great deal of healing started taking place at that point in time. And he just said, you know what, I was there. And it wasn't until I actually was in the process of writing this book, and I had a child in the hospital. And so, some people get to go to a mountain cabin or to a beachfront house. I did most of my writing sitting in a hospital room, being interrupted repeatedly, or at the Ronald McDonald House, because that was just my life, and the book needed to be finished, and there was no escaping to some idyllic spot. It was, no, we're going to work this out in the nasty now and now. And honestly, it comes down to, this wouldn't have gotten done except for the fact that God did it, because circumstances were not contributing towards my getting it done. But one night, I remember it so clearly, I had written or read again and had written part of that chapter with Steve Saint, talking about the 5 missionaries that had gone to Ecuador and the Auca Indians. And he said, you know what, my dad's death could not have happened unless God planned it, and he listed all of the reasons how it was that it never could have happened except for God saying, this is how it's going to go down. And I thought, oh my goodness, and I was almost afraid to ask. So if I'm going to be truthful, I was afraid to ask. But I laid it out there, and I thought, you know what? I need to know that God was not absent, or that he wasn't watching and wringing his hands and helpless to do anything because the devil was having sway at that point in time. That thought to me is really terrifying. So it was redeem this, and let me know how it is that Amy's death was not random or meaningless or something that you were just busy and didn't see and didn't care and didn't intervene. And so the book for me has been such a gift, because at that point in time it was like, Cori, work it through. Okay, then what? And then what? And then what? And in writing that down, I realized, you know what? Were it not for God creating all of the ways that she got past the safety guards there, her days were numbered before there was one of them. And God just said, it's time to come home. And he received her home. He didn't take her. And she's not still dying. She's not still drowning. She's not still struggling. And her momentary light affliction, Paul in the New Testament promises that there's nothing, it can't compare to the weight of glory which shall be revealed in us. And if I could see Amy right now, she'd be like, Cori, God is good, and I'm here, and I'm fine. So stop grieving for me. And then take what it is that you've got here and the hope that we have eternal. And that is, I say that unequivocally, I will love you forever. The kinds of kiddos that we take in, I fully believe that God's grace has got them covered and that they will be in heaven, and that my role in their life is to mitigate the suffering that they have here on earth. And then I'll see them on the other side, and they will be whole and well. And all of this grief, because it is grievous, it's not that I don't cry, it's not that there's not anxiety, it's not that there's not anger. You know, my husband and I go back and forth with, okay, do we need to call, do we need to go, you know, what are we doing here, and trying to find our way, him from a totally non-medical background and me from one, and him not wanting me to jump too soon, and I don't want to jump too late. So, you know, there's just the opportunity that we have all the time to trust God in the midst of what could be a devastating situation. There are so many marriages and families that fall apart in situations like that. I don't want to be another statistic, but I don't believe that God has brought us into doing this to see us destroyed.
And you can definitely see, Cori, in reading your book, how God has just totally intertwined it all together. I mean, I can see Amy, you living out her legacy, loving on all of these children. And, you know, it started all with Emma Lynn.
Yeah.
And how beautiful. Share a little bit about sweet Emma Lynn.
Well, one of the first things that I realized with her is, you know, that she was seizing. And I thought, I got you covered, girlfriend. This doesn't faze me. And when others would be holding her and she would be seizing, you know, it was like, oh my goodness, what is she doing? What, you know, what? I was like, you know, put your hands down, girlfriend. They're going to think you're Pentecostal. And, you know, and then they kind of laugh and it'd be like, this isn't bothering you? And I just would tell them, no, it's not that I want her to do this, but it is part of her package. It's what she comes with. And we'll just, you know, hold her and love her through it. It isn't a matter of trying to, you know, make sure that she never has any seizures, because that wasn't possible, but that we weren't so put off by them that we didn't want her because of her seizures.
So Emma Lynn came into your family, and you actually adopted her, correct?
Well, she didn't actually live long enough to be adopted, but she came to us, you know, without a name, and so we were given the privilege of naming her, and our name is on those all-important documents so that she was not left with no name.
And in that moment, and she lived 50 days, correct?
Yes.
That's a long time for a life to, when you look at the other side of not being in your home and being loved. I mean, you could have chosen and walked away and said, we can't handle this. I mean, even the doctor questioned you.
Yes.
Like, do you really want to do this? Are you like, you know,
are you sure?
You need to
do
go
you
have your nine checked out or something?
Yes. Yes.
You took it on.
Well, and, you know, there really wasn't any question in my mind when the opportunity came up to be able to do this. The deal was, okay, is Mark going to be on board? And when I told him, okay, there's a baby, and she is terminal, they don't know how long she's going to live, and they just want to know whether or not we'll bring her home and love her until she dies. And he's like, absolutely, when's she coming home? And that was a different man, or, you know, different mindset than he'd had previously when I had broached the subject of doing something like this in our home. He just at that point in time said, no, why would we purposely invite that kind of grief and heartache into our lives? No.
Part of it, too, looking at it from his perspective, I mean, he saw you suffering for a while with your medical history.
Well, and it wasn't until after having gone through that his mindset changed. That wasn't a deterrent for him. I had broached the subject with him about 9 years ago about, okay, you know what, I would like to be able to do this. I'd heard the Mark Schultz song, we don't know how long she's going to live. What do you want to do? And he says, I want to be her mom for as long as I can. I want her to know what it means to be loved. And I came home, and both Johanna and I just told Mark, wouldn't this be wonderful that we could do this for a baby that wasn't going to live for very long? And he was like, no. You do this for your job. We have a lot going on here at home already. We don't need the 24/7-ness of having a baby in our home that's going to die. And it was not an appealing thought to him at all. Well, then fast forward 3 years after I had been deathly ill and nearly died, and then he was kind of at the point where it's like worst case scenario was no longer worst case scenario. The thought of leaving Emmeline at the hospital to die there with no name and no family and no one who loved her and no one who would miss her or be sad that she was gone, that for him was worst case scenario. And so he said, absolutely, let's bring this baby home.
God sure knows how to break us to mend us.
Yes, there's that song that says, you drew me gently to my knees. And you know what? Sometimes it doesn't really feel very gentle at all. But
no,
he has
quite forceful, actually.
Yes, he has a way. And one of the things that I take heart with, because I don't want to be a blockhead. I don't want to be hard to teach. But, a refining process has to go on in everyone's life, and that just takes different forms. But when Jesus told Peter, Satan has asked to sift you, and he didn't tell Peter, and I told him no. I said, nope, you know what, he's fine. He said, I prayed for you. And when Peter, after this denial, and he comes back, and this is my take on it, that when Jesus was saying, Peter, do you love me? And he asked him that 3 times. And 3 times is significant because that's how many times Peter said, I don't even know him. I don't know him. I don't know him. And Jesus asking Peter that. Peter had been all bluster and blow before then. He was very confident. He was very naturally gifted. And then when push came to shove, in order to protect his own skin, he denied the very one he loved the most. So he tells Jesus, I love you. I mean, you know everything. But there's a sense of, but look what happened in spite of the fact that I love you. And Jesus says, feed my sheep. He didn't tell him, you loser. You know what, I'm going to find somebody else. No, Peter had been sifted. And so all of that pride and that self-confidence that I'm going to be a light for Jesus was just taken out. And I think that God has done that in my life, that I have some natural gifting. And then Satan was allowed to sift me, but God was completely in charge of that process. And he said, no, I know that Satan is here and he's wanting to kill and destroy, but that's not my purpose in all of this. My purpose is to refine that gold so that she can come out on the other side. And she has been through deep waters. She's been through the fire. And on the other side, she's going to have a trust in me now that wouldn't have held her up back then. I couldn't do what I do today if I had not been through what I have been through and then seen God's fingerprints, his working in all of it, to have me get to a place where I don't have to have any tangible evidence that what I'm doing makes any difference. There's a matter of I've been called to do it, I must be able to do it, and I'm going to trust God for the outcome and for the sustaining grace to be able to continue to walk through that day by day.
And he has blessed you so, Cori. I must tell all of you who are listening right now that you will want to pick up this book, I Will Love You Forever, a true story about finding life, hope, and healing while caring for hospice babies. One thing that crossed my mind as I was reading it, because we have special needs in our family, on both sides of our family. And you begin to question life in itself when you read these stories, thinking of, the news that comes on and says a body was found. And you think about the ones that are left behind. You write in your story here of, or was it Emma Lynn? Who was it in your book that was dropped off within the period of safe haven?
Oh, that was Emma Lynn.
That was Emma Lynn.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So she was dropped off in that period. And for those people who do not understand what it means to be able to drop off your child, can you explain that just briefly?
Oh, my goodness. Those safe haven laws, and they are enacted in all 50 states, are a gift. It is not a matter of encouraging parents to abandon their babies. There's just an understanding that they can find themselves in a situation that they cannot deal. And so that's a safety for the baby that there would be a relinquishment of that child and an acknowledgement that this is more than what I can handle. Please take it from here, and a family be found that can roll with what's necessary. And it's been there because too many babies are found thrown in a dumpster or in a trash can at McDonald's, or that just doesn't have to happen. No one has to feel that desperate that the baby has to be harmed in the mom or dad's incapability of handling the situation, but those safe haven laws are set up that a baby can be safely relinquished at a hospital or a fire department. And as long as the baby is unharmed, then the parents can walk away with no legal, action. They won't be hunted down. There's not going to be any criminal charges. There just are those times when it's more than what a parent can bear, and the baby still needs to be cared for, and someone is found to do this. And this does not in any way mean that I'm better. I'm just differently equipped to be able to handle some situations that might be harder to deal with for someone else.
Yes. And heavenly equipped at that. Your story, and truly, you have been blessed. This is God's divine plan for your life. You were, at one point earlier in your growing up as an adult and being a mom yourself and a wife trying to juggle life and craziness, you were worked on the labor and delivery floor, and then you became a bereavement specialist, a perinatal bereavement specialist. Talk a little bit about your experience there, because you also established a program called HALO.
I did, and that at least here, I had to step away from that role a number of years ago. So that particular program is not still going, but it was a Hope After Loss organization. It was a bereavement support program offering hospice support to families when their babies were diagnosed with a fetal fatal anomaly in the womb, or if they died via miscarriage or stillbirth or shortly after birth. So for me, with the Heart for Hospice that I have, a family member has died, and that family whose baby died, whether that was 18 weeks gestation or 18 weeks outside of the womb, needed hospice support. You didn't have to be 85 and dying from cancer. You know what? You absolutely should have hospice support then, but I don't think that this particular niche of people whose babies pass away should be exempted from the hospice care that can be given and supported through that. Continued on with that role, just not in an official capacity.
Now, you call your home House for Hope. How does that work? Because I know in reading your book that you got all these medical and background checks, and you're able now to foster children that have serious anomalies.
I call it a house of hope. It's not an official name, simply because, you know what, this is not a house of death. And sometimes in the media, you know, it can be put out there that she's had 15 children that have come to her home and died. And it's like, that's baloney. We haven't. So far, we've had one child that has come into our home and was expected to die and did so. I have 8 biological children, and I have some of my kids are married, and so I have in-laws. And we also have done medical treatment, foster care. So because of my nursing background, I'm able to handle children with complex medical needs. And so we've had 7 children that have come through our doors with medically complex needs, and 3 of them, okay, Emmeline and then Charlie, and we also have a 14-year-old right now who is terminally ill, have a terminal diagnosis. And then we had 4 that were medically needy to begin with, got all fixed up, and they are off and running and doing their thing and no longer live with us. So, yes, it's a house of hope, simply because the focus is, yes, the child's going to die. However, we're all going to die. Everybody is terminal. But whether or not you really, truly live is something that you kind of have a little bit of say-so over, and that is where, you know, we look at these children and we're not so consumed with the fact that they're going to die, but rather, you know what, how can we give you some really great quality of life today to make sure that your skin is in excellent shape, and that, you know, your hair is washed so that your scalp isn't itching, and that you're fed so that nutritionally you're not starving or compromised, that you have the meds that you need so that you're not seizing any more than necessary, and that your pain is taken care of, and that, you know, that there's music and that there's sunlight and that you're touched and you're loved and you're known. Those are things that give hope in that life, that it isn't all sad and it's not all just death, but rather the child lived until they died. And hospice is all about living until you die, not dying until you die.
And I do think that's a misconception that, quote-unquote, outsiders have, people who have not experienced hospice, whether it's for a younger child or whether it's for an adult. And most of the time I think we connect it to an adult, meaning hospice.
Right.
And we have hospice houses, and we send off our loved one, or our good friend goes because, you know, they can't be taken care of at home, and they're at their, you know, their last few days or weeks. How do you want to change the conversation, Cori, in how we see special needs children, how we see children that are not, quote-unquote, normal, who are brought into this life, created in the image of God, but somehow are left behind? How do you want to begin to change that conversation?
That's such a huge thing. I'm trying at this point in time not to be preaching so much with words, but living a life that gives testimony to the fact that there is something greater than fear, and that fear of a child's deformities or disabilities or the fact that they're going to die does not have to be ruling the situation. That you can put your feet on the floor and do what you need to day after day, and do it afraid, but give space to that, you know, because it's not that I don't have fear. It's not that my chest doesn't get tight and my gut doesn't get rolling when the oxygen sats drop out and they're struggling. I am still human, but there is an aspect of it where it just says, you know what, God, I can do this afraid. And courage is not the absence of fear. It's just the determination that something greater is at stake. And I also look at that, and Beth Moore had said, or someone that she quoted had said, courage comes from a heart that is convinced that is loved. And so, you know what, if I really am, and I want to live this way, and I encourage other women especially, because you know what, you set the tone, And if you're not freaking out, then other people are able to deal with it. And if you're being courageous, others can take courage from that. That if you know without a shadow of a doubt that you're loved, and that God has promised that He's your refuge and strength and a very present help in trouble, then you can live like that day after day. And I get to do the rubber meets the road here with these children that could knock someone else out that is like, I just can't handle that kind of instability or unpredictability. And I can't in my own strength, but day after day I get up and it's kind of like, let this day look like you want it to look like, and help me to be what I am supposed to be. So He calls us to be patient and kind and loving and tender-hearted and forgiving. Okay, well, I get to do that with people who are EMS, emergency personnel. I get to do that with therapists. I get to do that with physicians. I get to do that with doctors. I get to do that with my husband when we're kind of knocking heads over, okay, do I call? Do I not call? And with that child who really did not ask for any of this, but needs me to not pull away. And you read the book. You know that at one point, and I've had to pull back in again, Charlie scared me so badly that it's like, oh my goodness, dude, I don't think I can do this. And I sat across the room from him because he was terrifying me. And he was only 18 months old, so, that's pretty pathetic that, this little boy who doesn't even get out of bed can so terrify me that I don't want to even get close to him. And that nurse, bless her heart, I have no idea whether or not she's got a psych degree, but she was just not to be put off, finally said, look, I want to go to lunch. You want to watch the Packer game? Sit down in the chair. I need to get him settled. And I could have told her at that point, I don't want to hold him. Because it's really what I was saying. I don't want to love him. I don't want to be vulnerable to the hurt that this kid can wreak in my life. But I didn't actually want to say that out loud. So I sat down in the chair, and I had her put Charlie back in my arms. And then as I'm holding him close, I thought, the fear of how your death can shake me, can make me run away or keep my distance. But if I hold you close, then the fear kind of takes a back seat, and really my love for you is what needs to be in the front seat. And holding him close and drawing close is what benefits me at that time rather than staying away or self-protecting my heart. And I don't want to self-protect myself right out of my destiny, which I have that opportunity all the time to just self-protect and say, no, we're just not going there. But I would be short-circuiting what it is that God wants to do in my life, as well as these children would not possibly be provided for if I just decide to not risk being afraid or being hurt. They're worth it. Somebody needs to be crying when they die, and be sad that they're gone, and be glad that they came.
Yeah, because like you said, they may not be able to communicate with you. Their eyes, they may not be able to speak the words that we want to hear, but God knows all, and He has placed them here on earth for a reason, whether it's to touch your family, to touch somebody else's family. I mean, with Emma Lynn in the story, and of course people are going to want to pick up their own copy of I Will Love You Forever, because I promise you your life will be changed. Your heart will be torn and broken into pieces, and then God will mend it the way that, Cori, I don't think you have any idea what this book is going to do when it gets into people's hands. Because I know with Emma Lynn, you talked about how, I believe it was Bess, who came over and they had lost a child years and years and years ago. And there was healing to to themselves, because they never got to be able to say goodbye. There was never closure to their little boy, Davy.
Right. And that was one of the absolutely unexpected fantastic blessings that came along with it. And then that widow that had texted me, widower, whatever the term is for a man who's lost his wife, for him to send me that text and say, you know what, the 1-year anniversary was so much harder than I expected, and by this time people just think I should be done with my grief. Hello, she died a year ago. Why are you struggling now? So that 1-year mark, the 2-year mark, is tougher because people have moved on and you haven't. And he said that holding Emmeline, and for Beth it was just holding Emmeline, you know what, you're just a reminder that you're going to die here pretty soon, and that we better have a hope beyond the grave, or what's the point? What's the point? Because, then it just doesn't make any sense if you've got a baby that's going to die. If there's no hope beyond the grave, then it's just sad. Yeah. It's just hopeless. And it's not. It's not. And Emmeline was an absolute, from my girlfriend also that had knitted her that cap, she could hold Emmeline and not feel jealous. She had not been able to hold a baby up until that point because of Natalie's death. And, it was just, nope, you know what? You're going to be with Natalie here pretty soon. And she was just a reminder that you need to have a hope beyond the grave, that this life is not it, and that God just promises that whatever it is that we're going through here, suffering through here, will be so worth it, and that it's all meaningful, and that it's not random, it's not useless, that He is redeeming all of it, and that all of it will be for His glory. Now, I cannot tell you how that's all working out because I am frail and I'm human, and my perspective is like microscopic. But He promises that, and He can't lie. So I'm taking Him at His word.
And you've taken Him at His word, Cori, so beautifully, and you've opened up your arms as if God has sent you down here, placed you on earth to be His arms, to wrap heaven's arms here on earth around these fragile children, around these fragile lives, and even the adults that you touch. It's more than just the child that you hold.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful spiral effect, and I mean, it's glory. It's truly God at work, and my heart it sings for joy now, knowing your story and knowing you and knowing how God has just placed this incredible woman. And yes, I'm going to call you an angel because, it's not to put you on a pedestal, but it's to thank you from a different realm that I can't do that here on earth. Only God will be able to glorify everything that you do for these children and the family and the love that you give them. And it's unconditional, and that's exactly what God wants to do for us every single day.
Yes, and I have been loved unconditionally, and I have done everything possible to be able to repel God, and He has said, what else have you got? Because I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere.
Amen.
And you're so afraid that someone, if they truly knew you, would not love you. Well, guess what? And He loves me. Yes, He loves me. And because I know that I'm loved and that He's got me, it gives me the ability day after day to be able to care for children who need me to love them unconditionally.
So beautiful. And I got to tell you, though, you've got a man of gold on your arm, too.
Oh, I do.
Your husband, sweet Mark. Yeah. I mean, every once in a while I was like, I wanted to give a shout-out to him. When I was reading your book, I'm like, somehow he's still making it. He's still there. I think my husband would have killed me by now.
Yes. Well, and I think that there are a few times when he, certainly wanted to kill me. But, he didn't, and he persevered, and there is just a determination that he has that sometimes it's just raw courage, honestly.
Yeah.
That it doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't look like it's ever going to work out for good. But he just puts his head down, and he just keeps going. And he's got to have that kind of courage, and he's got to have that kind of steadiness to be able to do what we do here, because you know what, I'm not here 24/7 when I have to be at the hospital with our 14-year-old. You know what, he's got Charlie. And so if my family and my husband were not willing to take courage and step up and do this, it would not happen, because I cannot do this 24/7. This is not just a one-man show, one-woman show. It's not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a family, a whole family. It's a house of hope, and it's it's an incredible, beautiful story, and you're just going to have more stories to tell and the lives that you're going to touch. What a true blessing. I have to ask you this, Cori, for the woman and man who's listening right now, who's looking and needing that raw courage. They're just struggling in their life, whether it's because of a child or where they are, circumstance-wise. What would you tell them?
One of the things that I would like to say is that it's not painful. And it's not that it's not hard. And, there's no making light of that. And I don't think that we do ourselves any favors to say, it's really not that bad. Or you should find 10 things to be grateful for. The Bible says in everything give thanks. And I believe that. But I do also believe that there are like 150 Psalms that have people crying out and saying, God, I can't find you. Mm-hmm. I don't know where you are in this situation. But you know what? The Psalms are different than the children of Israel who were taunting God and saying he can't do this. And there was an anger and a disbelief there. And the Psalms, which are saying, I can't find you, I don't understand, I'm in pain, I'm hurting, but my hope is in God. And so then there comes in, that is where the faith aspect comes in and says, I can't see it right now. I can't see that there's any good in this. But I'm going to trust that that's just because my perspective is so limited. So like that song, Selah says, you know what, anything that's shattered, that's laid before the Lord will not be unredeemed. Lay it out there. And don't hold back. You can't fake it. He already can read your thoughts, and he knows what's in your heart. So there's no sense in, just playing that you're not struggling. But lay it out there and say, you know what, redeem it. And the www.desiringgod.org website has been hugely helpful to me with the Suffering and the Sovereignty of God series, suffering and disability. Those were messages that just spoke hope to my aching, grieving heart and helped me to say, okay, you know what, it's not all done today. I don't know what all God is doing here, but he's about 10,000 things at once. But though he slay me, yet will I trust him, is what Job says. So I want to be able to say that. And it really boils down to, no matter what happens, God is good and God is faithful. And whether my worst case scenario comes true or not, then God, and he's going to carry me through. And I've been able to test that out time and time again with things that I thought absolutely that it would kill me. I'd never be able to get up again. And he's like, you know what, this is just having way too much sway over your heart. Stop living afraid. I don't want to die 1,000 deaths dreading the one. So let's live while we're living. And God, you help me to do that. That fear has come up. What am I supposed to do with this? What am I supposed to do with this? And he promises if we ask for wisdom, he'll give it. And then he's not going to give you a hard time about it.
Yeah, sometimes we just fall short and we just don't ask. We shut him out instead.
Yeah, and you know what? Who wins then? Who would have you do that? Who would have you have that unbelief that God can step in and redeem it? Who would have you say it's too much, it's too late, or it's too little, and that this doesn't really matter? It all matters. If it's concerning your heart, it matters.
Cori, you're an inspiration. Yes, you are an angel, even though you say you're not, but you truly are. I know people are going to want to get in touch with you. Obviously, we're going to have all the information in the show notes as to where they can find your book, I Will Love You Forever, a true story about finding life, hope, and healing while caring for hospice babies. You'll want to pick up your own copy. But, Cori, people are going to want to find you and connect with you. How can they get in touch with you?
The Facebook page, just Cori Salchert, is fine. That's probably one of the best ways to do that, or the Safe Haven for Babies website, safehavenforbabies.org. And again, I am not like a web person or techie person. I can keep a child alive and run a ventilator and a feeding tube and a pulse ox, but I can't run my VCR. So, when it comes to techie stuff, I need an 8-year-old, and so please be very patient and forgiving, if there are techie glitches here, and I'm not gifted in that area, but I'm gifted in the areas that I need to be, even though it's an irritation for some who would like me to be a lot more savvy when it comes to website development. That's just not one of my giftings, and at this point in time, I don't really have the ability to do too much more about that. But I'm not hiding. Cori Salchert is just and the book is actually available online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, as well as Christian book distributors, and will be available in stores for Lifeway bookstores, as well as Barnes & Noble.
Fabulous. We'll make sure we have all of that in the show notes so you can readily find it and have it at your fingertips. Cori, you have blessed us with your heart, blessed us with your vulnerability, just opening up your life to us and really seeing through God's eyes. And I think that's really what this book says, is that, this is a peek into heaven. This is just a peekaboo as to what I do, what I want to do, meaning God, what God wants to do every day in the lives as we walk our journey. I will love you forever.
Yes. And he will. He will.
He will. Well, before I let you go, I have one last question. The series is called My Strength is My Story. What has your story gifted you?
The opportunity to take God at his word, that he says that I am with you. I will never leave you or forsake you. And I get to experience that up close and personal.
Amen. Amen. And you share a little bit of that with us. Thank you so much, Cori. I know God is going to continue to bless you in your efforts, and the House of Hope is going to be more than just a house of hope as you bring life and love to those whom you touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Feeling inspired, ready to train for life and love your journey? Visit CreateYourNow.com for more incredible resources to help you along the way. We'll see you next time on Create Your Now, Your Best Selfie. And remember, always be sure you consult your physician before beginning any health and fitness plan.